From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today I'll be reviewing the movie Message from Space, released in 1978, starring Sony Chiba, Etsuko Shihomi, and Vic Morrow. Directed by Kenji Fukusaku. Genre: action, adventure, sci-fi. Rating: PG. The budget was $5.5 million estimated. My rating is a 7.5. The synopsis is: the Jelusians are on the brink of annihilation by the evil Gavanas and have sent out 8 Laibi seeds that kind of look like walnuts out into space to find 8 unlikely heroes that will save them. Enjoyment. Well, I absolutely love old sci-fi movies, and the lower the budget, the better. For years, I had seen this picture floating around the internet, and I never knew what film it was from. I figured I would have to suffer through subtitles in order to enjoy it. A few months before I began reviewing movies, I got a chance to see this film without actually knowing a thing about it except for seeing the poster. And I went in with the lowest of lowest expectations. And to be completely honest, as not to get your hopes up, I'll let you know right away that this film has a lot of great qualities that I admire, but it isn't a great film. It's pretty bad, I suppose. Most people would consider this to be a very bad film, but I really feel like it falls under the guilty pleasure category because there are a lot of entertaining and funny aspects that I absolutely love watching in this film. And you know, after just watching the film for just a few minutes, I just fell in love with it as soon as I saw this film. I had no idea that this was actually the movie that I was looking for with that particular villain that I saw that picture. But when I saw him in the film, I freaked out, and I was like, finally I found the movie I'd been looking for such a long time. And the best way for me to describe this movie is to tell you that it's as if Star Wars, Voltron, and Flash Gordon gave birth to it. And I just love this kind of stuff. The pacing. At an hour and 45 minutes, it's not too long, but it feels long because the filmmakers were going for an epic space tale. And in some places, the editing is pretty hilarious, but what can you do? There are just some moments where you can't even tell the difference between reality and a dream sequence. So that gives you an idea that the editing was not very well done. It lacked a lot of grace, but this is one of the elements that make this film so much fun to watch. It's not a film you should take very seriously, so go in and have a good time watching it, and it could be a lot of fun. I know it's always fun for me when I watch it. Alright, the story. The most striking thing about this film is how much it's always compared to Star Wars. And there's no denying that. The story actually stems from a traditional Chinese chambara. It's also known as samurai cinema, which Star Wars also borrows quite heavily from. It comes from the same source of material. So let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat. The similarities in the story to Star Wars. And those include, there's a princess dressed in white with a purpose to save her people, and she also needs help from heroes to save her because she gets captured. To give the story credit, Many movies about princesses actually do the same thing, where the princess needs to be saved. In this film, as in Star Wars, there's a female character. Her name is Maya, which is very similar to Leia. And there's also a male character by the name of Prince Hans, which is very similar to Han Solo. We have the patriarch character that sacrifices himself and as an example to the younger generation to teach them honor. There is a robot with a number in his name. There is a cantina/bar scene. To be fair, there should be bars in space and other worlds, so that's like a typical thing that you should see in a sci-fi space movie. But it seems like most people associate any kind of bar scene with the Star Wars cantina scene. There's a reactor to blow up. There's a planet that blows up. There's space travel. And then there's a space battle as well. Now, the story actually brings a lot of unique things, which was not in Star Wars, which I absolutely appreciate. There are 9 heroes instead of 4. The Call of Duty comes from a MacGuffin, the Laibi seeds. They are seeds that choose the heroes. There's a narration and no text crawl. There is a planet that is a spaceship, which I thought was really cool. And then there's a machine that sees into people's memories. Then there are also 2 elder evil mother characters. And not only a planet was blown up, but they also upped the ante and blew up the Earth's moon. One of the characters is actually sold into slavery at some point. There's a spaceship that actually looks like a ship that is used on water. There's an actual lengthy sword fight in the film. There are several ground battles that are pretty extensive. And finally, there are just many more graphic deaths in the film. A lot of people said that they had trouble following the story, but I seemed to follow it fine. And maybe that was because I was pretty much sold on the film as soon as I heard the opening narration. It's a little heavy-handed to spoon-feed your story like that right in the beginning with exposition, but it really set up the world and their conflict right away, and I enjoyed that so much. After that, you have to bear with the language of the script, because the script is obviously not created by English-speaking writers. There's a lot that's lost in translation in their attempt to convert the language. And if you've seen any of the films coming from Japan and Hong Kong in the late 70s, this film really retains that kinetic energy and character language and fast-paced frenzy. I love that stuff. All the kung fu movies of the late 70s, absolutely brilliant. So your comprehension of what's going on may depend on your familiarity with this particular genre of films, English dubbed films in general, and also your willingness to try to understand it. The story feels a little convoluted and random in the beginning, as it's trying to set up the characters, and it really doesn't start coming together until about the 30-minute point, and you start to get the actual reason for all of this. You start to get things are starting to be explained to the audience. And we do experience the hero's journey with many of the characters, including the refusal of the call to be the hero and then finally accepting it. The title, Message from Space, really comes from the brief moment 54 minutes into the flick, when the villain sends a message to Earth to surrender, it's a subplot that brings all of the heroes together. The challenge. The challenge here are the Gavanas, led by Emperor Roxaya the 22nd and his mother, the Grand Empress. They have decimated Jerusalem and its people in order to control it. In pursuit of keeping control, Roxaya learns about Earth and decides that it's the only suitable place for the grand conqueror of the universe. And that's when things get really spicy. He goes all out defending his turf and threatening the Earth. Roxaya is a smart villain, but he had been told several times by his mother to do things that really end up biting him in the butt later. There's a scene where she specifically tells him, "You should kill that girl," referring to the princess. He agrees with her, but he doesn't actually follow through. Of course, later on, the princess leads a party of people to usurp him. It just goes to show, mother knows best. Now, empathy. What I like about this film is that it's not about one character at all. There's no lead. So some people found this to be very, very confusing, but I thought it made the story bigger, and it brought to light that even the smallest contribution to the outcome makes everyone a hero. And as I said before, we have about 9 heroes if you include the princess. On planet Jerusalem, there's a very proud leader, Kido, who sends out 8 Laibi seeds into space. The legend says that these seeds will fall into the possession of the chosen ones, the heroes that will save their people. Kido sends his granddaughter, the Princess Emeralda, and a brave warrior by the name of Oroko to bring the heroes back to fight the Gavanas. The princess is beautiful and courageous, swaddled in a white garb that stays pristine throughout her adventures. I know, a magical feat. Her character is the most pure and dedicated to her cause. The first 2 to receive the Laibi seeds are Shiro and Aaron, 2 young hot rodders having fun in space doing stunts with their small ships. They kind of remind me of Apollo and Starbuck from the original Battlestar Galactica TV series in the same year, 1978. Shiro is a fun-loving and supportive friend that kind of goes with the flow. Even though he's young, he seems to be grounded, but he's not as fleshed out of a character as his friend Aaron. Aaron is a fun-loving guy as well, but he whines a lot and he has a bit of a temper sometimes. He may be acting out because he secretly is in love with the princess. It's actually really hidden well. We don't actually know that until it's mentioned in a dream sequence that he has. He finds a scrap of her fabric and he gets sentimental every time he thinks of her. It seems it's impossible that they would actually get together because they have no visible chemistry on screen. And there is an obvious prince in the story for her to eventually fall in love with in the future. Maya is an interesting character. She's a rich heiress who likes living on the fast lane with the hot rodders. She bumps into them and she kind of gets wrapped up into this whole story. But she actually wants to help. She wants to be part of the heroes. It's kind of nice when she comes up with ideas to show how she can help the hot rodders use her ship as a docking bay during attacks to surprise the enemy. And finally, when she herself gets a Laibi seed, you kind of feel really happy for her because of all the people, she has the most courage to help the Jerusians. After leaving his position as a general because he wanted to give his former robot, Beba 1, a proper memorial, General Garuda is probably the most practical choice that the Laibi seeds pick because he is trained for war. Garuda loves to drink, and in his drink is where he finds the Laibi seeds. Initially, he refuses the call of duty, but then when he sees them again, he considers it an act of God, and he's ready to help in any way he can. Garuda's sidekick is a robot companion, Beba 2, replacing his old one. Beba seems to have no actual function towards helping the Jalusians win the battles, but he too actually gets a Laibi seed. The gang flees the Gavanians only to bump into one lone Gavana. His name is Prince Hans. Prince Hans is not only a Gavana's warrior, but the actual heir to the Gavana's throne, and he is also wearing a Laibi seed. He is a lot like Garuda, a seasoned fighter, and he has the added motivation to fight for the Jalusians because Roxea killed his parents. He's what I think is one of the best heroes in the film. Now, of the 8 heroes, that is the most unlikable character is Jack, who is a con man that could be considered important because it is due to his greed, all of the heroes working together to defeat Roxea. And I saved the character of Onroko for last because he's extremely dedicated to the cause. But he has a moment when he cracks under pressure. You can't really blame him too much. He's been hit over the head quite a few times, and he's really tired of the fight. He becomes an unlikely hero and also gets a Laibi seed. Technically, everyone wants Star Wars-like special effects in sci-fi films, but many studios didn't really want to put up the money it takes to make that happen. This film was about $5.5 million estimated, and it was the most expensive movie made in Japan up to that time. But to put things in perspective, it took $11 million to make Star Wars. So no one really could compete with Star Wars at the time. Many of the shots of the planets in space were simple drawings and not made to look photorealistic. But there were lots of really good miniatures and incredible action sequences. Lots and lots of explosions that would probably make Michael Bay blush. The costumes were kind of funny because there were lots of very cheap looking costumes. Like the Jalusians, they had basically plastic vine crowns on their heads that you could probably pick up at a 99-cent store now. But they were awful and really unimaginative. And then we have a space cop that actually wears sunglasses in space. Why would you need to wear sunglasses in space? And then we have Garuda's fur coat, which was pretty tacky. Emeralina's swaddling of white that always stayed clean no matter what she did. Maya's costume was pretty terrible. And the list goes on. But then there were some really cool character designs that were really creative, like the design of Roxea's costume and all of the Gavanas. They all looked really, really cool. I just loved their look. The music for the film is interesting. It almost sounds as if it inspired the music of Masters of the Universe. With the fluty marching themes, I think I heard one piece in this film and it just reminded me of Masters of the Universe, and I was like, whoa! And it happened like whenever the bad guys were around. And then now speaking of Masters of the Universe, Skeletor's helmet at the end of that movie really looks like Roxea's helmet. It's very, very similar. The performances, all the performances they're okay. For the time, acting was different. But I feel like Vic Morrow really stands out in this film. playing the role of Garuda. I mean, he's the one you feel is the most realistic character, and he brings a lot of gravity into every scene he's in. And also there's a very cool, very little cameo from Kroner Chris Isaak, who briefly appeared as a card-playing gambler before his career began as a singer. The best part of the film, I mean, where do I start? I just love the energy in this film, the frenzy, the quick zoom-ins, the explosions, just the mayhem. I just love that kind of malarkey in my, really cheap sci-fi films. My wish list, we can start from the beginning to the end of this film and tear it apart if we wanted to, but I really have a very short wish list. I mean, one, I wish that the film kept a cinematic musical theme throughout the film instead of mixing in contemporary jingles that were popular at the time. My only other wish is that I also wish that the princess had been given one of the Laibi seeds. I just think that would have given her character a little bit more like validation and depth. The ending, I thought that the ending was pretty interesting when the heroes actually decide to stay with the Jelusians as they go out to seek a new home planet. It was very unexpected and kind of anticlimactic after such a huge battle sequence with hundreds and hundreds of explosions. But it was okay. It was nice. The film was a flop in the US, but it had a cult following, as well as had some influences beyond the box office. This movie was followed by the television show San Kukai that was popular in France and Peru. And parts of this film were used in video games like Asteron Belt and Galaxy Ranger. And in so many ways, this film is not just another Star Wars ripoff, with a few elements that actually predates other Star Wars films. Did Star Wars actually rip off this film? Sort of like as a, hey, you know what? Why not? They ripped off Star Wars. They can, Star Wars can rip off this film. So here's a few things that show up in later Star Wars films that I think is interesting. One is the hologram of the Emperor. More than one fight going on at the same time. The tunnel dogfight to the reactor. An actual battle on land. And a bad guy falls to his death with electricity and then explodes. And again, it's an acquired taste if you're used to dubbed foreign films. For me, this is a very charming film from 1978, and it's just what I love to put on when I'm having a weekend of lo-fi sci-fi marathons. Well, that sums up my review. I hoped you liked it. And it's Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers. I'm off to my next review.